Well, I love it when you get to hang around people, hear from people who, I don't know, I come into space like this and I learn a lot, right? And you learn a lot of things that you can go and take away, and some of the things you apply to yourself, and if you're like any other normal human being, you'll recall 5% of that and you'll reinvent the other 95% by tomorrow morning. Hence why we record it. But when you can take some of the things, take some notes, and I find it helps you become, this is not the right word to use, but unfoolable. When you're in front of other people, it's like, while big, strong, brave, tough businessman, woman sitting opposite you is saying these things, you know they're having issues with all those things that Clive went through before.
Yes.
Yeah, and it is just a wonderful posture to have. Not that you're in the business of proving people wrong. That's a way to ruin life 101. But it's just knowing, okay, well, I've got a little more of a relationship here to build until the trust comes through. Yeah, you just okay. I understand what you're saying, but that's a little bit of a porky pie. Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. And I understand you've embellished the truth a little bit there, and you can just brush through a lot of that stuff. And when you have that great relationship is when they come clean with the goods and they're identifying with those things that Clive just went about. And I love being in rooms like this because it just helps you become, I'll find another better word than unfoolable, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
What we do within these events is we love to cover topics that make a difference. And we heard an incredible talk last week from Ray Hope. It is recorded, so do your best to get a hold of that, on the importance of exercise and just some really interesting thought processes around that and some practical steps as well. And we need to be reminded of it, because if I were to ask those of you who were in the room last week, what was it that Ray said, or even worse, dare somebody ask you, what did you implement from Ray's talk? You might be feeling a little bit red-faced and guilty, right? So we put these things on regularly so we can actually make a difference, because often if we're left to our own devices, don't we reinvent the wheel? The other topic we love to dig deep into is the idea of the mental edge. And it's kind of only the topic, isn't it? It's only kind of the thing that holds everything together. Because no matter what the strategy is or what those skills are that you're learning, I love that story. I've heard that story too, Clive, around the trucking guy. I think it was might be a Jamie Allison story. And he's the guy who swapped his Coke and Snickers for a protein bar. He went up out of the truck, he did a lap of the truck before he did his delivery, right? And so it helped him increase his steps. But without somebody having that disruptive question to him, like with a disruptive thought process, and interrupting his excusitis and going, no, you do have time, because what if you just did this instead, right? It's okay. The solution is not what you're thinking, because if that was the solution, I agree, that would be way too hard and way too challenging. Yes. But there's actually an easier, smarter, better way. And sometimes we've got to make room in our lives for hearing these things. And that's why I love the mental edge so much, because it actually keeps, when you take responsibility for putting yourself in a room like this, or listening to some of the stuff we've got on audios, catching up with some of the guys that are in the room, and you're plugging into events like Monday night, you're keeping those most critical things that we know are important, you're keeping in front of mind. So there's less stuff to brush out of the way to get to the actual stuff that counts. Right? Because the deeper, the more in depth you dig it and deny it, the more ground above, it's much harder to start again. You know that feeling? So the mental edge is critical, because that kind of helps you keep on track with the one thing, the two thing, the three things you've learned. Gosh, if you come here every week in the year, then that's the 50 of how many weeks we're going to be here this year, 50 odd things you've learned to maybe implemented, and you can keep with the mental edge, you can keep the right attitude, so when you hop out of the truck, you don't go, too hard. You do your lap of the truck, and you just get on with what you've got to get done. Does that make sense? The mental edge is only, it's only like the thing. And so what's the point? The point is with mental edge as a topic, is I found it really confronting, and particularly from my background, I found it really confronting when we talk about these topics, because the only way to get better is to actually put yourself in an environment where you're challenged. Yeah? And so the mental edge type things about getting the emotional intelligence, it's caught, not taught. Yeah? And to catch it means you've got to be in an environment. It means you've got to be around people who are examples of those things, not perfect human beings. We still yet to find a group of them to collaborate with. They think they're too good for us. But when it's caught, it's not taught, and it's this unwritten. It's not a written language. It's not a textbook. It's not a book. It's a whole combination of things. It's all the spokes in the wheel that add up to it. And I find it can be a little bit confronting when faced with, and this could just be me, when faced with, well, you've got to read that book, you've got to listen to this, you've got to come over here, do your 5-year timeline, and all these things. It's like, man, talk about paralysis from analysis, like sometimes you can feel like that. So my fallback plan is always, you know what, when I feel confused, when I feel like, oh, holy cow, I thought I had a mountain to conquer, but now there's 10 mountains. The default setting is to get in an environment that keeps things simple, that keeps the priorities front of mind. I went to, our son goes to school. I don't know if there's others like it around the place. I haven't visited every school, but this particular one, it is on another planet. And they opened up, this is about 3 weeks ago. They're called a Link Precinct, Learning Innovations for a New Queensland Precinct. And this is technology park they've got in this school that goes from kindergarten right through to grade 12. Universities are trying to lease this place because they didn't even have the technology they got in this place, from robotics through to full media pre-production, post-production, 3D printing. Like it is. Their whole thing's decked out like Google too. Like Cooper goes along, our son, he's on the iPad and stuff, and he's sitting in his Google lounges like all this. They got international speakers and lecturers that are on iPads or sitting on a robot that goes around to the class and talks to them and communicates to them, and their face is the robot, right? It is incredible. These guys are expecting to collaborate internationally. They're expecting information now, and they're expecting, anyway, that's a little bit off topic. The point is the Governor-General opened up that building, and he said, in his opening speech, he said, a couple of nice things. He said, well, you know, there were 3 big things that were affecting him, and they were negative things. One was the president of Singapore was gravely ill. This is just recently, and something ISIS and whatever it was. There were a couple of things, and he said, you know what you've got to do in moments like that? In moments like that, you've just got to make the effort to get around an environment like this. And that school was an environment he was relating to, and I think this is an environment that's on a whole other level to that as well. You need to take responsibility for getting in an environment like this. Getting, listening to stuff that's not going to help you get ahead, or being around an environment is not going to put you in that state of having the mental capacity just to handle that split-second decision to make the right choice. Do I go around the truck or not? What an easy thing to do, what an easy thing not to do. But how much emotional quotient, how much EQ is involved in going, yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And then the next, I've already done it once, surely that's okay, I'll just do it the next time. No. The EQ required to go, no, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
The EQ required to go, no, I'll do it again. See, can you imagine the lessons you'll learn? The guy like that, and without trying to be stereotypical of truck drivers, but you wouldn't want to put a microphone in their hands in front of a group of people, right? If it's a business setting, okay? But you put the microphone in that guy's hand, he would make a difference because he's got action, hasn't he? He's got those things that he's applied a change to, and his EQ would out-trump the executives I've met. He would probably out-trump them, okay?
Donald Trump.
Out-trump Donald Trump, yeah. I don't think that's too hard at the moment, is it? Yeah. I read an incredible book a number of years ago, and I love it because it's a really simple analogy, backed up with a whole lot of science. This makes me feel smarter. And it's a wonderful book called The Ant and the Elephant. And there's some things online, if you want to take his name down. Vince Procenti was the author, and he's a speaker and so forth. There's a couple of things on YouTube. Nothing from him on TED yet, but I'm sure that's coming. And, the idea of the ant and the elephant is this incredible analogy, and man, it stopped me in my tracks when I read this, and just realising the vastness of this example, and actually how accurate it is. The subconscious and the conscious mind, right? And Clive alluded to this before. The conscious mind is represented by the ant, and the subconscious mind is represented by the elephant. And here we are with our conscious thoughts each day trying to teach or show the elephant which way to go. But the elephant is actually, he's the one choosing the direction. It's by our habits, by our default nature, the things that we've become ingrained as neural pathways that have been so engraved that make the difference, right? And it's how we try to make logical decisions. We try to think our own way through things based on our previous experiences and our habits, and then we wonder why we're not actually getting a result. But I'm busy. But I'm working hard. Yeah. But I've tried losing weight before. I've tried getting healthier. I've tried doing this. No. What you are is you're an ant on the back of the elephant. You think you're heading east, but the elephant's heading west. Right? That's the one that's in charge. Yeah. In fact, there's when you look at a series of processes that happen in the brain. When if you take a snapshot of a second's worth of energy that's flowing through the brain, there's about 2,000 connections that are being made or in process of 1 second in your conscious mind. That same second, there are 4 billion connections being made in your subconscious mind. Wow. The ant and the elephant. Right. And that book leads you through a path about how to train your elephant. Does that make sense? Not how to train your dragon. That's another cartoon thing. But how, like, do you get what I'm saying? And so things like that, you can't teach that. You've got to catch that. And your subconscious is aware of so many things that you consciously are not aware of. That's why you pick up a language. That's why, I heard I forget who it was who spoke about it, but they joke about the language of Spanish, and that they were learning Spanish and weren't very good at it, and but then they saw kids walk around with 3-year-olds in Spain who could speak Spanish, so clearly it's not that hard. But his first language was English, and this was an issue for him, right? Trying to solve things with his conscious mind, but we all know the best way to learn any language is to immerse yourself in that environment. The mental edge is an immersion subject, right? But then that produces another problem, doesn't it? It's like, okay, if I'm supposed to immerse myself in that environment, like, I don't have the time. Anybody use that excuse lately, right? And doesn't it mess with your head? It's like the same do with a truck driver. He doesn't have time to do a walk. You don't understand. He gets paid per delivery, blah, 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 blah. I don't have time for that. But you do have time. And it's particularly when you get some advice, some counselling, like what Clive was talking before, some mentorship around being smarter with your time. And you'll absorb that information a lot better when you've been around this environment for some time, because there's a foundation that's being laid. See, what's happened is we have... actually, I'll come back a step. You're probably all familiar with the concept of the continuous improvement model, right? There's little 1% plays, those percentage plays that make all the difference. Because you look at an athlete, and the sports is wonderful for analogies, you look at person A versus person B, the one who came first versus the one who came second, and in many cases there could be 1,000th of a second, like in the Formula 1 world, or even swimming and all those sorts of things, right? The difference in a game of rugby league, I'm a massive rugby league fan, and the difference between winning and losing could be a split second of the timing of a pass, right? And what leads to that timing of the pass is the way that the body is positioned, right? Because that means they've got to shift their weight, which takes an extra 0.3 of a second by the time they're loaded to get rid of the ball, and it just all accumulates into a non-result, right? You might have heard of the Toyota's example. They've got this, anyone heard of Kaizen? Yeah, it's a fairly common sort of word that sprouted around, but it's about this continual improvement model. And what they've did through Toyota, for those who aren't aware, is a number of years ago now, they valued everybody's opinion and everybody's role, and they gave them permission to make these improvements. And the way they made these improvements was within their particular station in their manufacturing plant, no matter where they were in the food chain. They had little whiteboards up, or versions of those, and they could write down the things that really ticked them off, or the things that needed improving. And they started off with big things, but the real magic of this Kaizen process came years later when they fixed all the big stuff and was just down to these little percentage plays. Because people would be doing tasks, and they would find, when they got this mindset about this continual improvement, it was all the big obvious stuff that they dealt with, but then the real difference was made is when they realised that, you know what, I'm doing 2 movements here instead of 1. And the timing of those movements continues up, multiplied by the 4,000 other people who are doing 2 movements instead of 1, adds up to be an extra year's worth of time that could be saved. What could we achieve if we had an extra year as a company per year, right? And when you add those upon those, that's why when we come from this community is that we're always looking for ways for that continuous improvement. We're always looking for ways, not because we're bored, lonely, just trying to make things trickier. It's because with a lot of action and as a collaborative army, we're finding the smarter ways to be doing things, and we want to put people like that on stage who can share their example, because you can take a snippet of that and apply it the very next day. And that takes the mental edge. Like, that takes understanding not only what it is that you're looking for, it takes being able to put yourself in an environment like this because you didn't feel like walking around the truck, but you bothered to rock up here today. And you can learn something, you can just get a vibe, maybe you can get a comment from somebody afterwards, maybe it's something you've written down, whatever it is, and you can go and implement that immediately or share it with somebody and it makes a difference. Does that make sense? In sport, I gave a couple of examples of those percentage plays. It's amazing. Anybody, the guys might like this. You know, the full analysis of the game itself, and they rattle off all the statistics, and you see the halftime stats, and you look at completion rates. In rugby league, don't quote me on this one, but it's something like if you're completing around 85% of your sets, then you've got an 85% plus chance of winning the match, right? So hold on to the ball is the game, right? And hang on, what about the tricky this and that and the kicking and all what about learning how to tackle? Yeah, all that stuff is critical for sure. But when you got that right, when you got those skill sets right, what are some of the things you can focus on that make a difference? And for them, it's like hold on to the ball, right? And it's 85% completion rate. Same thing in my background within martial arts. It's like there's this big myth about being fast rules, and it's not true whatsoever. Being fast is important, but it's actually not the thing that counts. Because you can't stop what your eyes can't see. So if you can move in a way that tricks the human eye, that makes your eye not be able to pick up on movement sooner rather than later, it means you can buy yourself some more time, which gets you a better result. Now, anybody can do these things. It's just about learning those percentage plays. You with me? So what about your health? Ever made a dumb decision before? ever skipped lunch for the 7th day in a row or the 3rd day in a row or whatever it is, and you haven't done the right thing, and then you react? I got a great example of a great reaction today by me. Like, it's just allow me to go, how good am I, right? Bear with me. I'm in the office and I'm trying to recover a situation that started to go a little bit downhill. And I couldn't get the gentleman on the phone, and I thought, I'll pre-frame our conversation with an email so at least we get on the same thinking before I go to address it, because I couldn't get him on the phone. I thought, let me just put an email out. Now, it wasn't an issue, it's just that he was starting to go this direction and I needed him to go a little bit that direction for his benefit, not for mine. He just couldn't see the outcome, right? So anyway, and I hate doing things on email, but I just, I get him on the right page and start to flesh out those emails. So you've been in that zone before? This is an important email. Like, and I type like this as it is, so like it's an extra, well, not really, but I have my issues. Anyway, Cooper comes into my office, my 5-year-old boy, 5.5, and he comes in and he goes, Dad, I just counted to 1 billion. And I went, oh no, good on you, man, that's awesome. And I'm thinking that was it. And he goes, can I show you? In that moment. In that moment, you with me? In that moment. Anyway, and I knew, like, he was excited about it, right? And before I got a response out, Tamara, my wife, had called out, all right, kids, it's nearly time to go to the car, right? And he's gone, and you can see it just hurt him that he wasn't able to share that. And I said, sure, mate, I turned my chair, man, I'd love to hear it. And I'm thinking, he's going to do 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 1 billion, all over, get to the car, see you later, that type of thing. I've got an important email to type. Anyway, so he stands there and he's 1, 2, 3, I won't bore you with the details, but he gets number by number by number all the way through to 100, right? And I'm thinking, so this was cool, this is great to see that. And I'm going, surely it's going to go from 100 to 1 billion. Like, is it? And I'm waiting. You get 81, 82, and you're thinking, actually, no, I've got time for this, because he's going to get to 100, and then it'll just be 1 billion. And okay, I've got time for this. No worries. And so you're counting down until I can get. But that your mind's distracted. And you're trying to, and you don't give him that your full attention. Yeah. Anyway, and he said he got to 100, 101, 102, 103, 104. I'm going, what do I do? What do I do? Anyway, the point was, and what ended up happening was he got to 110, and then he went 110. Then he went 109, 110, 1,000, 1,001, 1,002, up to 1,010, and then he goes from 1,010. He goes 1 billion. 1 billion and 1 billion. So actually, technically, it counted to 1 billion and 9. Right? so anyway, the point being is that that moment, and I could have squashed that little bugger's excitement, because I'm busy being busy, and I think, and this is not the thing that made the difference. The fact that I ate a protein bar beforehand is not the difference. But when you're deliberate about just making sure you're paying attention to the right things, I wasn't cranky. I knew it was an important thing that I was doing, but I was not cranky. Ever been in this is an important email, I now must get into serious cranky mode to get this out. And then someone comes along, I want to tell you to count to 1 billion. No! Right? I knew it was important, and please don't misinterpret this as the protein bar is the answer. All right? But you get what I'm saying? When you pay attention to the right things, because you are what you eat, you are what you put into your mind, it's all part of the picture. And when you can control that split second, and give them the credit. I mean, the dude counted to 1 billion in his mind. Like, high five, yeehaw, now get to the car. Right? So, What we're about here is we're about creating a community where we can get together, where we can put different people on stage who have the runs on the board in one way or another, one background or another, but relevance to the community, where we can create new pathways of thinking. Because if you're not deliberate about it, what chance have you got? One of the best things about, myself and all my degrees, totaling 0, are going to talk about neuroplasticity. Okay, neuroplasticity. There's some really cool books around that, but layman's terms books as well. So if you don't have a degree and you're a part-time surgeon or a full-time surgeon and you don't want to read those neuroplasticity medical journals, there are plenty of books around that teach you and just give you some faith that you can relearn or learn new things, and you can get things to the point where they're a habit. Like you didn't have to think how to walk up the stairs. Right? But at some stage, my daughter is 2.5, and a while ago she had to think consciously about how to get up each step. But you didn't have to think about it. It was hard in the beginning, but it becomes easy. There becomes a neural pathway. Her body learns, muscle memory, all those things her body learns, and she just does. Okay? Same thing with you. You can have these responses, good or bad. There's going to be a response. Hopefully it's not a reaction. Right? We would like trained responses that work as quick as reactions. That's another step altogether. That's what we used to train in before. But in the neuroplasticity, when it comes to your brain, is that you can actually relearn you can relearn how to think. Your brain takes the path of least resistance. What is the path of least resistance? It's that emotion that comes up every single time that you just head down by default. You don't even have to try, you just end up being happy. You just end up being concerned. You just end up being worried. You just end up being elated. Do you know what I mean? It just happens on its own without any effort. Because some point in time, you rewind back, there was enough example after example after example, enough evidence and proof of concept over time that was the path of least resistance. So when a circumstance like that pops up, you get that feeling, right? Big fat grey hairy spiders, right? That feeling is because you put that in the big fat grey hairy spider section of your brain, and you have that feeling that's a connotation with it. Over time, if you were to put that big fat hairy poisonous spider picture into the warm fluffy bunny basket, right, and attribute those feelings to it, you can get a new pathway on how to think about that and get the feeling about it, because we react on feelings too. We're emotional creatures. Ever figured that out? Right? And you can have lots of warm, bunny, fuzzy feelings, right, by getting yourself in an environment that puts those scary things in that basket. Does that make sense? Yes. And that's the same thing when it comes to business thinking, it comes to dealing with people, it comes to dealing with yourself, and it comes to making right decisions. It's critical that we pay attention to the right areas. I want to trust when I put somebody in front of somebody else, there's the very high percentage. I'm not expecting perfection, but I'm expecting a very high percentage of a great result attitudinally. Yeah. That interaction needs to be a positive interaction. It could end up in 0. It could end up in a relationship or a 0 financial outcome. That's okay. I'm not worried about that. But I want that interaction to be warm, fuzzy, purposeful, deliberate, engaging. Yeah, when I put somebody in front of somebody else, because I expect when people put other people in front of me, or I deliberately put myself in front of others, I want them to feel those things in that space, in my space. Yeah, so I've got to be making sure I'm doing the right thing so I can get the right result. And part of that is from making good decisions is about keeping the main thing. Did you notice? I love those things that Clive put up there about the things you can't outsource. Right, relationships and those areas of relationships. You can't outsource that. You can't outsource your health either. But you can, the rubber ball scenario, you can outsource your business and lots of components of it. But you can't do those other two. That's your responsibility. And you get those right. The promise has always been, you get those right, that other area which you value so much becomes a lot easier, a lot more fruitful because you're paying attention to the right areas.